I, along with many others, back in 2017, fell in love with Alex Cameron's bizarre, over-the-top caricature persona that he gave us on Forced Witness. It was quite a unique twist to an album of its kind. I haven't quite heard anyone play this macho, Marlon Brando-esque character in an album before. It's definitely one of the most unique albums of the 2010s. I stand by that. It's one of my favourites of the 2010s, and even after many listens later, the jokes don't get old. That album to me is still as hilarious as it was as when I first heard it. It's like going back to your favourite episodes of a comedy show or even a comedy film, and as many times as you've quoted the jokes with your friends, you've replayed the scenes over and over again, the jokes just don't get old because the comedy is just that fun, it's that hilarious, and you just seem to always find a way to laugh at it. This album is that in an album form, which isn't really that common, particularly with just a random singer who didn't make an album like that before. You might expect it from Weird Al Yankovic, but you wouldn't expect it from a random guy from Australia who just didn't put out music like that before that one. Trust me when I say it is incredibly difficult for me to not compare anything he puts out ever since Forced Witness to that album, because we know how funny he can be, and the fact that he hasn't really touched on the comedy since then, it just feels like missed potential, and this new album once again is feeling that kind of way. So if you're going to replace the comedy with something else, then you better believe that I'm wanting that something else to be anywhere near as good or at least interesting, and I just don't feel as though he's managed to do that, to be honest. The worst part about it for me is that there are topics that he sings about on this album, on his last album, Miami Memory, in a way that you could twist it and spin it into a comical idea, and you could use a persona, you could use a character to play the part of someone making commentary about those things. You know, the track that he was singing about where his girlfriend does porn on his last album, why didn't he do that using the character that he's given us before and make it like, I don't want my girlfriend to do porn or use OnlyFans? That might have been pretty funny, to be honest, on this album as well. You know, there's the track where he's talking about how he's just surrounded by people that are, you know, dithering and dathering in all the conspiracies about, you know, vaccines and things like that. Again, this could have been presented funny, but it just ends up being pretty okay. I think he's scared to push the buttons, and I think the reason why it's more apparent now than ever is the track Cancel Culture, where he's talking about all is left to do is just cancel culture because, you know, it's too scary these days and things like that. Again, could be just one big joke, but I just think the presentation of the song itself isn't really that good. The rapping is really mediocre and just sounds really corny, to be honest. It's not Alex rapping, don't worry about that. You don't want to hear him rap, obviously. But the person that comes on is just like, hey, kids, yeah. The vocals on the chorus just sound really poor as well. Yeah, I'm just getting a sense that he's too afraid to touch into that persona before. It's like the idea of a TV show, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, you know, catching that heat if a particular audience found out about some of the jokes that were made on that show, because that is probably one of the raunchiest and boundary pushing comedy shows I think we have at the moment. Not so much in its later seasons, but actually, no, you know what, even its later seasons, it's not as funny in its later seasons, but it certainly is still pushing boundaries. And I feel like he's scared that a certain type of audience is going to touch on his music and not be happy with the jokes he was making on other albums. So he's just leaving it behind and playing it safe. That's just what it feels like. He's just playing it safe. I think musically, Best Life might be the best track. I don't necessarily think the music on this album is particularly bad. It just runs a bit stale at points. Like the synths can be quite overpowering. and the melodies aren't really very natural sounding. It feels like the melodies are getting a bit forced and shoehorned in a really weird way. There's just this kind of like plasticity to some of the tracks and the way they sound, but I do think Best Life actually works pretty well. That synth sound comes through in Hold the Line in quite an odd way. I feel like this track reminds me of something that would have made it onto LaRue's Trouble in Paradise album. I swear to God, this track, especially on the verses, sounds so much like Sexotech, which was a pretty decent jam on that album. But again, similar issues with both albums, actually, where there's a bit of like a muffled lo-fi quality and the tracks don't really pop very much. I feel like that happens quite a bit on this album by Alex here too. Dead Eyes is the track that is kind of touching on this story about a skinny white boy who always is looking for lines, whether they are brown or blue or anything like that. But then Alex Cameron goes on to say he's just going to give him to them anyway. I don't know if he's talking about, you know, drugs. And I don't know what he's talking about or referring to when he's going to give it to him anyway. But it's certainly a strange topic for a song. Not quite sure what he's going for in this one. I can't lie to you guys. The final track as well with bloody the Sleaford Mods guys, Jason. This track is bonkers. There is something so weirdly animated and over the top and ridiculous about this track that is so garish and ugly. And I can't help but actually kind of enjoy it. This is one of the weirdest tracks I think he's put out in quite some time. I do not know what is going on ultimately, but it kind of works in the weirdest way, to be honest. Definitely nothing I'll ever go back to ever again once I've forgotten about this album in like a few months' time. But just while it's on, I'm kind of like bopping in a really weird way. The quality of the track is just so hard not to look at. It's a really weird moment. The track breakdown vocally is a weird one because it sounds like he's trying to pull back something from Forced Witness with the way he's singing and the flow of it. It sounds like when he's going, I got money in the bank, pussy on my mind, yeah, that whole thing that he does, I've been waiting for you. It sounds like it's going to lead into that track. But yeah, I don't know, man. Instrumentally, this album isn't all there. I think that was something that made Forced Witness so good, because even though the tracks had ridiculous lyrical themes, at least the songs were really catchy. They were produced well. The hooks were really, really on point and memorable. If you took away the comical effect of what he's trying to go for with his character and stuff, you would still have really good pop tracks at the core of it, with a nice sprinkle of the heartland rock sound of maybe the 70s, early 80s, that kind of thing. It's all really well put together. You've got even a bloody Brandon Flowers feature from The Killers. I mean, come on, man. It all had its appeal, and there was something really well crafted about the whole thing. Whereas this album just feels like musically it's not all that impressive. The hooks are kind of just there, to be honest, most of the time. And if they're not just there, they're absolutely annoying and borderline atrocious with tracks like Cancel Culture. Aside from Best Life, I'm just hearing a lot of tracks that just don't really have great aspects to them. Like, there's not a great lyrical theme, the vocals are fine, the songs are just okay, the hooks aren't really great. Like, I'm just left feeling like ultimately this is just a bit of a meh album. Even without knowing this artist and knowing the past and knowing what he's done before, if you played this album, I can't imagine you getting a huge amount from it. Fair play to you if you do, but I personally don't see the huge appeal with what he's given us here. So yeah, it's another disappointing album from him, to be honest. Gotta go 5 out of 10. Definitely not feeling it, to be honest, at all. And yeah, that's just where I'm at. So it's a bit of a letdown, but yeah, maybe that's just where I'm at with this artist at this stage. So let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching. As always, do subscribe if you haven't already. Have a good day and goodbye.